creation, to creation, to creation. Native of my blood goes back to creation, to creation. Native before America was a nation, was a nation, was a nation. Native before America was a nation, was a nation. Been here, live here, the plan wasn't still fear.
That's good.
Guess what, still here, 500 years of epigenetic pain.
Tansen et Otamek. My name is Jarrett Martineau, with the most extensive introduction ever. I hope I can live up to that. I cannot stop thinking about Stuart McLean now. How many of you know the writer Thomas King, the Cherokee writer Thomas King? Okay, go and find a recording of Thomas King. Close your eyes, Stuart McLean. They sound identical. It's crazy to me. I was listening to Stuart McLean, much in a similar mindset as you from before, and then I was at a Thomas King talk, and I was like really listening to what he was saying. I closed my eyes and I was like, oh my God, they're the same. It's bizarre, trust me. I'm very happy to be here, very happy to be back on Coast Salish territories, and very happy to be with you all this evening. Thank you so much for coming. I wanted to reflect on the kind of worlds that I've been inhabiting and working in for the last while, and to try to pull out some of the things that have stayed with me in the last few years with the work that I've been doing, some of which was talked about, well, extensively in the bio. The artist that you just heard as I was starting is Natani Means, the son of Russell Means, one of the founders of the American Indian movement from back in the 70s, who's a hip-hop artist. And that song was called Creation, as you heard, native going back to creation. And the painting that you're looking at right now is by an artist named Kenneth Lavallee, a Métis artist from Manitoba. And this massive, massive piece is about, in a way, the confluence of multiple creation stories, a piece about the great floods that have happened before that exist in a lot of early mythologies on the part of different cultures from around the world, including indigenous stories from out here on the coast and other places as well. Time when the water took over everything. And Kenneth made this piece that hung outside the Winnipeg Art Gallery, and I want to get the dimensions right. It's 35 by 41 feet, hanging on the side of the art gallery for a massive exhibition that just closed this spring called Insurgence Resurgence. And it's the largest indigenous art exhibition that was ever mounted at the gallery. And Kenneth, talking about this piece, was talking about wanting to actually return to some of these original points of mythology and search for a kind of optimism and hope, both of getting through the cataclysmic times that we've experienced in the past, the apocalypse that Native people experienced 500 years, and the previous versions of this that we've experienced, and also looking ahead to the cataclysmic times that we're living in and those that are coming. And a lot of this in the art that's being made in the indigenous community right now across many different kinds of genres and styles and forms is about a certain kind of re-mythologizing, world-building, world-making, imagining of possibilities. And so that's a lot about what I want to talk about today. One of the themes that came up in the exhibition that was held at the University or the Winnipeg Art Gallery is the idea that the future is indigenous. This comes out of also some work that's being done at Concordia University right now with an organization called AbTech. And a lot of the thinking around this is about bringing indigenous people back into the present. So thinking about the idea of a creation story that exists through multiple senses of temporality, not only as something historical that we're now on a linear trajectory away from, but as a future that's continually being remade. And I think if you look at what's happening right now, particularly in this country, but all across Turtle Island, there is a tremendous, tremendous uptake in what's happening on the part of indigenous people in their cultural production across all art forms. And this idea, at least some version of it, is something that has been informing my own thinking. And as was mentioned, this led to the creation of a project called Revolutions Per Minute, which has evolved into many different things over the years. But one of the things that it was about bringing back into the present the contemporary music that's being made by our people. And seeing these currents, these through lines on the part of younger people who are looking for a place to have that voice really be heard, to create a platform to amplify those voices that have been silenced for so long, systemically, violently, dispossessed of a space even to call our own. And so a lot of the work that's been happening on the part of our people, I think, is about trying to find those spaces. And this is one version of that, of something that I created and that we've been working on for many years. And in an earlier version, we were thinking about the future in some, I don't know, maybe stereotypical ways. So I think the idea of what the indigenous future is for me has shifted and changed the further along that I've gotten in the work that I do, and watching in a way the future that we anticipated come to be the present that we're living in. And so it's not only about this kind of futurisms, we put together this mixtape a few years ago as kind of the otherworldly science fiction universe. It's actually about what's happening right now. And what's happening right now, I read a piece last week about a whole wave of work that's happening now within the literary field that's sort of considered the next wave in indigenous literature. There's a whole movement that's happening in cinema right now. The visual work that I described at the beginning with the Winnipeg Art Gallery is indicative of a renewed commitment to giving space to indigenous voices, but across many different institutions where historically have been denied. And so I've written and thought a lot about this in the context of music, some of which you've heard at the beginning of this presentation, some of which you will hear later in the evening. But the idea of the next wave is also very much not about trying to stage a site where something is to come. It's about identifying what already is. And so even for Native people, the idea of the future is always embedded in the continuum and the inheritance of everything that's gone before. It's not only about a future that's yet to come, it's about a future that's already arrived that we're building in a continuous way. And in music, you see voices like Tanya Tagaq, a group like A Tribe Called Red. How many of you know Tribe Called Red? That's them on the left-hand side at the opening of the Juno Awards. I believe that was 2 years ago. And we're finding indigenous people in spaces that we never expected. And to me, that's a really important thing. These guys were making a soundtrack to a social movement that many of us were a part of a few years ago called Idle No More. Some of you might have been a part of that movement, might have heard of it, might be aware of it. What for me was an important current that was happening through that was looking at the way that music played a critical role in soundtracking and supporting that struggle, in actually providing a place where people could imaginatively see through the politics that were being enacted through the music. And music was a cornerstone of that movement. You found our people, I mean, here in Vancouver, it happened all over Turtle Island, but you found here, even in Vancouver, there were round dances that were being held in shopping malls on Boxing Day at the height of capitalism. And you had our people here, the people from this land, the Coast Salish people here, singing their traditional songs in circle in the middle of that space. And that return to presence is something that I think I really want to kind of bring to the fore, because where that's gone in the span of a few short years has resulted in an incredible recognition of the work that's being done by people in our community. So one of our sort of preeminent music prizes, of which Vivek is also long listed for her project for this year, which is amazing. 3 out of the last 4 winners of the Polaris Music Prize in this country were Indigenous women. That's incredible. And if you know the work of Tanya Tagaq, Buffy Saint-Marie, and Lito Pimienta, and particularly, Buffy's been in the game for a minute. If you know about the work that when Buffy started out, there was no next wave. There was just the Buffy wave, like by herself. There was nobody else out there. And in her lifetime, she's been able to witness the rise of all of these voices alongside the building of a community, the building of a sense of possibility that comes with the strength in numbers. And this is not only about the non-Indigenous community recognizing the work that's happening on the part of our community. It's about the power of our own expression, having the artistic and creative merit to be given value at a time where there's increased interest and possibility on the part of non-Indigenous audiences and non-Indigenous people to actually engage with us. And I mention this because when we first started RPM, we were still battling with these stereotypes about what Native music is. And people expect it to be like this. This is from 1916, the ethnographer Frances Densmore, collecting songs. The songs that she was collecting here, extracting, we could also say, were of a Blackfoot chief, Nina Stacco. And I show you this photograph. I'd forgotten actually about this photograph until an artist that I that I Columbused a couple of years ago. An artist that I met a couple of years ago started telling me about this project that he was working on. And that artist's name is Jeremy Dutcher. How many of you know about Jeremy Dutcher? Not that many. Okay, beautiful, wonderful. Before I talk about him, you got to hear what I'm talking about. I want to keep listening to that song with you. I wish Jeremy was here sitting at a grand piano playing that song for you. He's classically trained as an opera singer. He's a Wolastoq artist from New Brunswick, Maliseet artist, one of the last 100 speakers of his language. He's in his mid-20s, and his entire project was taking, not these Blackfoot recordings from 1916, but archival recordings from more than 100 years ago in his community that he found on wax cylinders. And because of understanding the importance of language as a critical part of our existence as Indigenous people, he said, I need to play these songs in a new way. I need to bring these back in the language. And so for the last many years now, maybe several years, he's been working on this project of completely transforming these songs, becoming fluent in the language, working with elders to figure out what the best way is to present these songs, incorporating the Western styles of classical music that he's learned, and in the process making an absolutely beautiful, beautiful album. This album is also nominated for the Polaris Prize. I'm not endorsing the Polaris Prize, but I didn't get paid to come up here and talk about the Polaris Prize. But what's interesting about Jeremy's work is it's exemplary, I think, of the movement that I'm talking about. All of these re-words are recurrent. I mean, we mentioned the radio show with Reclaim, but there's this work of reclamation. And actually, Jeremy spoke, I want to run out of time really quick, but I want to tell you what he said about that encounter with the archival work. Nina Stockel was his name. Her name was Frances, mountain chief of the Blackfoot, shared songs. I sit today as object and subject of that gaze, both studier and studied. All I came to do was time travel, bringing voices forward in dances to create our own conversations. And there's this work of moving between spaces and times that we're seeing Indigenous artists do, I think, with an increasing dexterity and ability to not feel locked in the past, to not only be saying we're still here, but to be advancing that historical knowledge in ways that are reimagining the future in the most dynamic ways possible. Jeremy was part of a project that we did a couple years ago. I'm going to skip ahead because we have not a lot of time left. There's a group called Mob Bounce that we work with. Leanne, who you'll be seeing later this evening, and Zibiwan, who was another artist that we work with. Jeremy was part of a project that we did last year called New Constellations, which was, shouldn't have been as revelatory or as kind of much of a political claim as it ended up being, but it was really the first time in any of our experiences as the artists and organizers that were involved with the tour that we'd made a concerted effort to put Indigenous and non-Indigenous artists together on the same tour, and we toured around from Alberta all the way out to New Brunswick. Did a bunch of shows where the Indigenous artists had equal billing as the non-Indigenous artists. They weren't there opening for the more well-known non-Native artists. And something really powerful happened that was transformative for all of us in the process, which is that without setting out to do some kind of government-determined 94 recommendations fulfilled checklist of how to get along between Native and non-Native people, we found the space to just be together, and be together behind the scenes, be together on the stage, to spend time with one another. And it pointed out to me the fact that a lot of the work that Indigenous people are making right now, Indigenous artists are making, especially through music, is about envisioning a future where we actually do share our experience. And again, like we did the tour in 2017, at the end of 2017, that shouldn't be such a shocking proposition. But to me, it made all of us aware that the seeds of that are the seeds of a kind of future that we actually all want to inhabit. Because if we are talking about versions of the future, we have to be talking about what is the kind of future that we envision that we want to share together. And at least to me, The music that's being made by Indigenous people is pointing some of the way forward. Hi, hi.